Fall camps across the ACC have opened and quarterback competitions have begun. We'll take you inside those right here on Locked On ACC.
You are Locked On ACC, your daily podcast on the Atlantic Coast Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of the Locked On ACC podcast. I am Julian Council, and he is former NC State football letterman Kenton Gibbs, and we are a part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Today's episode is brought to you by Kalshi. For a limited time, download the Kalshi app and use code Locked On to get $10 when you trade 10. On today's show, we're going to take you around the ACC as everybody has begun fall camp heading into this 2026 season. There are some notable names like Kevin Jennings and Isaac Brown who are dealing with injuries, a big news item for NC State as they look to rebuild their defensive line this season. But let's focus on some of the quarterback competitions throughout the league that have begun over the course of the last week and a half. We're looking at Clemson, at Duke, North Carolina, and strangely enough, Virginia Tech. Apparently, looking at Tech sideline, Andy Bitter does a great job covering the Hokies. He has a four-man quarterback battle. I see it as more as a two-man, but we'll get into all of that here over the course of the next couple of segments. But Kenton, we got to start down in Death Valley as Clemson has, I would say, the most high-profile quarterback competition ongoing heading into the season between Vizzina, who has been waiting his time, and then Tait Reynolds, a true freshman who Dabo Swinney was high on after spring, and he really closed the gap in that competition. But right now, according to Dabo, it is Vizzina who has the pole position. But Reynolds, he's right back there, finding a way potentially to take over this job. What's your overall read on this situation that's playing out after Dabo said what he said back in the spring and even kind of doubled down during ACC kickoff last month?
You know, Julian, you're married. I'm sure you're married to a great woman and all that good stuff. But there was an old saying in Dayton. My mother always used to say, if you think you was in love with one woman and then you met a new woman and fall in love, pick the second one. Pick the second one. Because you never really loved the first like that. If a second woman that came in and made you fall in love that quickly. Vizzina been there for 3 years. He's been there for 3 years. How did Reynolds close the gap in 3 months? What's going on? Hey, I've tried to tell Clemson fans, and they've been in the comments calling me everything but a child of God. And looky here.
Oh, God.
Looky here. Right? I told y'all it's a problem if a quarterback that's been there for 3 years is in it shouldn't be no pole position. The race should be over. He should be doing donuts. Go ahead, jump out the car, get your little milk or champagne or your Bud Light. Or, Julian's the NASCAR guy, not me. I don't know what they drink these days after they win. But he should be, the checkered flag should have already flown. The fact that there's still an ongoing race when one of these guys showed up well after the other is a problem. It's a problem. South Carolina, we have a problem. And so I look at that and I say, you can look at this one of two ways. You can look at this as like a great endorsement of Reynolds, or you could look at it how I'm looking at it. What the hell going on with Vizzina? And that's how I'm looking at it. That's how I'm looking at it, honestly and truly. Because even if Tait Reynolds is the guy of guys, even if he's the next Trevor Lawrence, 3 years on campus shouldn't be erased that quickly.
No, and look, I doubt he's going to be the next Trevor Lawrence, Deshaun Watson, or even Taj Boyd. And when I say even Taj Boyd, he is one of the all-time leading passers, not just at Clemson University, but in the history of this conference. And he is also the quarterback coach there. Now, speaking of Taj Boyd, there have been some comparisons to Taj Boyd from some observers of Clemson practices. I think Paul Strelo and Larry Williams of Tiger Illustrated, part of the On3 Network, do a great job of covering this program. But according to a contact, they talk about how Taj Boyd had one of the quickest releases that they had ever seen. Apparently, Tait Reynolds is right there up there with his mechanics, his release, just the velocity on the ball. They compared him to former Clemson quarterback Kyle Parker, who, like Reynolds, was also a baseball player back in high school, which probably is what brings the arm streak. And there's a little concern about whether Vizzina can make those throws to the boundary, if he's going to have enough zip, if he gets out on time in order to get that first down instead of what could be a pick six. And certainly Saturday night in Baton Rouge come Labor Day weekend, you can't have any of those against that secondary that is one of the highest paid units in all of college football. So that appears to be the concern. I think Vizzina is going to win this job. It's just a matter of how long will he hold on to the job, really, when you think about in the past with Trevor Lawrence and with Kelly Bryant. We saw a full season of Kelly Bryant, what he was not able to do that year in 2017. And then what happened once Trevor took over, they won a national championship. They went undefeated that season. And I'm also curious if this is a Cole Stout, Deshaun Watson situation where Cole wasn't great to begin, and then Deshaun was that guy. But again, I don't think Tait Reynolds is likely going to be those guys. It's not really fair to use those comparisons when looking at it, but we do know that Dabo has it in his nature to make the change if he feels like he has to. But one thing I found interesting from some of the intel I read is that Vizzina apparently is like beloved in that locker room. It is an open secret at this point in time that Cade Klubnik maybe was not disliked at Clemson, but he wasn't maybe the most loved guy there in that locker room. Apparently, everybody is behind Vizzina. So I do wonder if Dabo goes with the freshman, does this team stay connected? Because according to a source, this team is far more connected, 10 times closer than they were a year ago, when very clearly that team got off the rails pretty quickly, and that season did not go the way we thought it was going to go. So I think Vizzina probably wins it, but it is interesting, all the talk about what Reynolds looks like physically at the ball coming out of his hand.
The power of friendship only matters when players are playing strictly for scholarships. It's a different ball game now. You got guys that are, and this is not me being funny, some of the money that some of the gentlemen right now in college are making, they don't ever have to work again in life if they don't choose to. And I mean that. I'm not saying that that's everybody. I'm saying I know that that's a 1% of 1% outcome. But I'm saying some of the top guys in the nation right now in college, you're done if you don't want to work again. Like if you didn't love football and you were just like, hey, man, I ain't trying to have no Myles Garrett, Jared, bro. I ain't trying to have no Aiden Hutchinson chase after me, man. I'm all set, actually. I'm done. They could do that, right? It doesn't matter who that locker room likes. I've seen it firsthand. Oh, this is our guy, and we love our guy, coach. Well, when that coach says, yeah, that's great and all, but this guy can make throws that your guy can't. So I'm going to need you to go out there and block the best you can for this other guy. Guess what they're going to say? Yes, coach. Yes, sir. And they're going to do their job, okay? The reality is, again, I'm not a Vizzina hater, despite what people would like to believe. I'm not a Vizzina hater. I'm just calling balls and strikes. And right now, I am seeing very clearly that if Vizzina was loved by the locker room, like you say he is, and if he had the goods, this would not be a conversation. It wouldn't be a conversation. It would be, hey, this guy has been here for 3 years. He's got the goods. The locker room loves him. He's the guy. Tait's our backup. Actually, there's a competition for backup maybe. The true freshman, he looks good, but we don't want to dub him quarterback number 2 right away. Vizzina's our guy for now, though, until something miraculous happens. And again, if you are, here's the thing, Julian, that you're putting Clemson in the worst spot than I am, to be honest, because you're saying that you know that Tait is not the next Trevor Lawrence, the next Deshaun Watson.
Well, I don't know. And I don't, and look, Trevor and Deshaun, just if you believe in things like recruiting rankings, like they were the top quarterbacks in their class. I mean, Reynolds, by some services, is a 3-star. And so that's just my thing. Like, I don't think anyone's sitting here thinking he's going to be those guys. He could be, certainly,
and that's my point. If you don't believe, the only way that this could possibly, the only sliver of hope, the only iota of goodness, if I am in Clemson, South Carolina, if I got a little tiger paw on the side of my helmet memorabilia in my background, if I'm one of those guys, the only hope I have is, oh, Tait he's out of this world. He's a freak show. We've seen him, and he's different. He's one of those ones, as the kids would say, he is him, right? That's what you would want to see. But if the belief is he's pretty good, like, oh, yeah, he's got a quick release. He's got some things to work on, but he'll figure it out over time. When you remember what people talked about Trevor Lawrence like when he first got there, it was like, oh, if he could get drafted tomorrow, he might not be number 1, but he'd be a first rounder for sure. Like when Deshaun got there, it was a little different. But by the time that we like got a good feel for Deshaun, it was like, oh, he's going to be the number one quarterback in the draft. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. You know, that's just what it was. So to see that we're now talking about Tait, like, he could be good, but there's still a conversation with a guy that's been there for 3 years, that's a problem, man.
I think it's also a little surprising because you go back to the spring there at Clemson. I mean, Chris Denson, when Chad Morris took over the job, you saw Denson play against Furman last year. And I always caution people to not make too much out of what happens in a game against an FCS opponent, especially when the talent disparity is what it was between Clemson and Furman. It was not like Furman was a playoff team last year in the FCS, but Denson came in late, made some plays, was electric, showed you some things that you hadn't really seen from Cade Klubnik as far as being excited about a quarterback. And they went to the offseason. There were contacts saying that, okay, Chad, you're back here. His number one job is to get Chris Denson ready to go next fall. Well, Denson, he didn't figure it out. He's now playing wide receiver there in Death Valley, and he's probably going to be headed to the transfer portal come January. It was Tait Reynolds who kind of surprised, even though Dabo liked his quarterback room, didn't want to go out and spend money on a veteran quarterback via the portal, wanted to stick with Vizzina, who he'll tell you is a guy who he was only interested in him and Arch Manning when they were recruiting quarterbacks a couple years ago. Clemson famously doesn't really send out a lot of offers anyways, but he went with that room, and Reynolds impressed in the spring, and I think that's something that raised Dabo's eyebrow, while Vizzina just physically, even the arm strength maybe isn't all that impressive. So it'll be interesting to see because if, especially nowadays, receivers like TJ Moore got paid a lot to be here. Bryant Lesko got paid a lot to be back here at Clemson. If they thought that Vizzina was a bum or that the guy was a bum coming in, that being Tait Reynolds, they probably wouldn't still be here. So that's one of the things I always think about with these wide receivers, knowing especially this is your money here. This is year 3. This is your chance to go out there, make money, get to the NFL where the real money is at. If you didn't think you had a guy who could throw you the ball and get you there, you probably wouldn't be there. So that's an endorsement I would think also for Vizzina, but maybe they just like him so much as a friend, and that's why they're still here as well, which that is not the best way to go about business if that is the case, and he ends up not being very good. But there's other quarterback competitions ongoing in the ACC at Duke, at Carolina, and apparently at Virginia Tech. We'll talk about those here in just a moment on Locked On ACC. Before the season even kicks off, everyone's making predictions. Who wins the conference, who makes the playoffs, who's lifting the trophy at season's end. On Kalshi, America's #1 prediction market platform, you can trade those predictions in a live market. Will the Clemson Tigers win the ACC this year? Right now, Clemson is trading at 7%, meaning a $100 trade would pay out $1,341.14 if Dabo Swinney and the Tigers win the conference. On Kalshi, you're trading against peers in a live market, meaning there's no house. And as the probability changes, you can buy in and out of your position. Trade the draft, pick the game, and more on Kalshi. Download the Kalshi app and use code LOCKEDON to get the $500 in bonus bets when you trade $25. KALSHI, Kalshi. Trade on anything 18 over only. Restrictions and eligibility requirements apply. Event contract trading involves risk and may not be suitable for all investors. Kalshi products are not available in all jurisdictions. Prices, values, and available markets may differ from those mentioned. For more information, see kalshi.com/regulatory. We're going around the ACC, taking a look at some quarterback competitions. Clemson is by far the most high-profile competition. Who will Dabo throw out there at the other Death Valley in Baton Rouge on that Saturday night during Labor Day weekend? Who is Manny Diaz going to have to replace Darian Mensah? Darian Mensah left Duke at the final hour of the portal back in January and put Manny Diaz and the Blue Devils in a terrible situation. And then come ACC kickoff was saying, oh, yeah, the guys didn't make me feel comfortable. I just think it's pretty lame for that to be the rhetoric. You took the money, you went to a better program. No one's going to fault you for doing that if you just straight up with this and tell us why you wanted to go do that. But Duke now has Walker Eget, the transfer from San Jose State, who last season was an honorable mention All Mountain West recognition, which, okay, cool for you, Walker Eget. And also have Dan Mahan, who's back for his second season after redshirting last year at Duke. Eget missed all the spring as he was recovering from both an ACL and an MCL tear, which he finally had surgery back in January. And Mahan, he had all the snaps back in the spring. I'm not feeling great about the Duke quarterback situation, Kenton, if I'm being honest with you. Feel bad for the Blue Devils, even though I don't really have much love for them, but there's certain ways to go about doing your business, and didn't really love the way Mensah did it. So honestly rooting for Manny, who's gone out and won games with Malik Murphy, and he has not been a good quarterback at all in his time at Texas, Duke, and at Oregon State.
You know, the biggest thing I would say here is, well, I've always talked about you can win in spite of a quarterback, with a quarterback, because of a quarterback. Here's the thing. Duke doesn't have the team to have in spite of or with. Yeah. I don't think they have a quarterback, or they have a situation, a team set up, rather, that they'll have to win because of their quarterback. And I think that Walter Eget is on the lower end of with. I think you can win with him. I don't think he's a bad quarterback. I don't think that he's the type of quarterback that you're like, if that's your guy, you are in trouble. I don't think that. But I am going to say, I mean, hey, you're going to need more. You're going to need him to show up in a meaningful way. Or if Mahan is the guy, he's going to have to show up in a meaningful way. The quarterback play it's not going to be Mensah-esque. You're just not. You don't see Darian Mensah walk through the door every day, but you're going to need a guy that is going to be dynamic. You cannot just have a guy, I'm hitting plays on time, on target. You can't have that. Not only did you lose your quarterback one late in the midnight hour, but while he was packing his luggage, he packed up wide receiver number one with him. He said, come on, Coop, come on down here, man. You know, get on the way from Durham, man. You know, you ain't trying to be near McDougal Terrace. Come on down here to Coral Gables. They got something called South Beach. You want to come on and see that? Yeah, that's where you want to be. You know, with all due respect to McDougal Terrace, I'm just messing with you. But in all seriousness, this is a moment where, I mean, I think that Duke's quarterback battle, regardless of who wins it, I think them making a bowl game this year is a very successful season for them, because, again, you had your two biggest offensive weapons, not including your running back Shepard, in the portal right away.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, not right away, at the last moment, so you could not replace them right away, which you got left in the lurch. And I really do feel for Duke, but the game is the game, man.
And it's not really changing. And I look at the situation, too, around either one of these quarterbacks. Duke does lose to all ACC performers, Brian Parker being the headliner there. But they do bring back two guys with starting experience from last season, and another in Bradley Smith, who played in every game and actually started the Sun Bowl for them. So they at least have a little bit of experience there on the offensive line. They still have Jeremiah Hazley, the tight end, who's one of the best tight ends in the ACC. It'll be interesting to see what the receivers are able to do for them. And Nate Shepard's still here. So there are a few weapons offensively to where, yes, you would like for the quarterback to be a little dynamic, but maybe if you can just do your job, you might be able to do enough to where if they win 6 games this year, that's a hell of a job by Manny Diaz, who's already done a great job so far. He just won the ACC back in December at Duke, which I know how they got there. I know what happened in a non-conference, but they won the games that they needed to win, and they're ACC champions. So you can't really take it away from them at all. So I think Manny's a solid coach. Tough situation. I would think it's probably a positive for Duke if Mahan wins the job, because he was there all spring. He was there in the system last year, and that he's a guy that you did recruit and you've been developing, and he will be, hopefully for Duke's sake, he'll be here next year. That is provided that he is playing well enough and Duke does not want to try to bring somebody else in. So they are splitting reps right now with the first team, that being Walker Eget, the grad transfer from San Jose State, and Dan Mahan, the, I guess, homegrown product there at Duke. North Carolina, 8 miles down the road, 15501 in Chapel Hill. Billy Edwards and Miles O'Neill, they are fighting for that job. Now, O'Neill, during the 2 times the media has viewed practice there in Chapel Hill, has received the first snaps and throwing drills. But every indication, according to Jason Staples of Inside Carolina, part of the On3 network, Billy Edwards is the front runner to be the starter in Chapel Hill. I said it last week from someone I talked to close to the program. O'Neill, by far, is the best thrower of the football. Physically, the most talented of those quarterbacks. Now, Travis Burgess, who is a guy who was a top 100 recruit, was injured last year towards ACL in his final year there at Grayson High School in Georgia. He may actually have the highest ceiling, but we don't know when he's ever going to get an opportunity. It appears to be O'Neill or Edwards, but likely going to be Edwards, which, again, when Edwards was signed by Carolina, I was not impressed. I was not encouraged. But this is where apparently it's leading, as there's only 2 more Saturdays that there's no football until Carolina's heading off the island to face off against TCU.
Y'all better hope that it's O'Neill. You better hope and pray that it's O'Neill. Because the thing about Billy Edwards, we've seen it. We've seen the tape. The tail of the tape is out. With either one of the other guys, you at least have hope that, hey, he can do something. He can be something we haven't seen. We have seen Billy Edwards' definitive ceiling. We've seen it. We've with all due respect, we've seen it. This ain't well, maybe, well, possibly. No, dog. We know who you are. In the words of one Sean Carter, you could try to change, but that's just the top layer. Homie, you was who you was when you got here. We know who you are, Billy. Get on out the way. Let O'Neal get in there, spin, do his thing. Let the young buck get in there, spin, and do his thing. But if I am a North Carolina fan, I am hoping and praying and wishing that Billy Edwards is not QB1 running out of that tunnel. Because, again, Carolina is another team. If you're going to be freshman-led, that means that you're going to need a freak show performance at one of those marquee positions. You're going to need a freak show quarterback. You're going to need a freak show edge rusher. You're going to need somebody has to be just like, oh, he's different from the rest of us. He's not like the rest of us. I don't see where that comes on this roster. I don't see.
Yeah. And like even reading some of the intel, defensive tackle is a spot where you certainly think that's going to be the case. Now, I told you before, we're going to find out about the player development. And it's not just identifying players, because they went a different route where they're trying to find diamonds in the rough, which is not really what you're trying to do here in college about talent acquisition. But they believe, and maybe they're going to be right, that they can develop better than anybody else in college because of their background in the NFL. A different sport, but yes, still football. I understand all of that. So we're going to find out about that. But defensive tackle, there's guys that like Trayshawn Ruffin and Vodney Cleveland who sound like they're going to be having an opportunity. They're running with the fourth team. Now it's very early still in camp. We'll see how the season plays out, but that is something that is going to be interesting. But yeah, it's not very, I wouldn't say like discouraging that Edwards would end up being the guy. I just think that the ceiling may be a little bit lower while the floor could be higher, just because it sounds like a lot of the issues that these other quarterbacks, I'll throw a Torrey Newkirk in there, the sophomore, now that we don't have red shirts anymore, sophomore, who was actually the handpicked quarterback that they wanted last year, Bryce Baker, now from Virginia Tech. They've had issues just throwing high, that being O'Neal, it's Newkirk, and also Travis Burgess, where Billy Edwards has been a little bit safer with the football. And look, Bill Belichick, we know one thing about him. You're going to turn the ball over. You're not going to play for him. Bobby Petrino, same kind of way. And the turnovers that dealt with at Arkansas last year is something that Carolina can ill afford to deal with. So if Edwards taking care of the football, the rest aren't, then I mean, that's who you have to play, whether fans are excited about that or not. That's the best way to win football games, especially when there's a lot of questions about the talent on the roster in Chapel Hill. One last one before we take a quick pause here. Virginia Tech, looking at Tech sideline, they have four-man quarterback battle right now. Ethan Grunkemeyer, Bryce Baker, Troy Hoon, and Keldon Ryan. And James Franklin said it, that all four of those guys, they're rotating reps every day, and they're tracking every throw, getting a full evaluation, and apparently they're not in any rush to name a starter. Now, all due respect to Troy Hoon and Keldon Ryan and their families and their friends, this is a Ethan Grunkemeyer and Bryce Baker competition with really Grunkemeyer is going to be the guy who wins this. Like, are you surprised by this? Because I couldn't believe when I read that.
I am, because historically, James Franklin hasn't been a quarterback competition guy. He's been a coach that comes out and tells you early, this is our guy. Hey, he's going to take reps with the ones. It just squashes it. So to see that not only is he doing not that, but the complete opposite. Hey, everybody in the quarterback room, you know what I mean? We had a manager sit in the quarterback room for too long. We thought we gave him some first team reps. We didn't know until we realized he was lefty and had a noodle arm. He wasn't supposed to be on the field. So that's something that I'm surprised to see from James Franklin. That's something that is very different from him. But I do agree that I think this is Grunkemeyer's job to lose. I really and truly believe that, hey, he's probably going to be the guy. And the thing about Virginia Tech, we all talked about how much they won the offseason, the recruiting, that, you know, James Franklin is where he is where his hotbed of recruiting is. Here's the thing about that. That does not manifest in year one. Same thing that I said about Tosh LaPoy. I think that he's a wonderful coach. I think he's doing a great job on the recruiting trail. That does not manifest in year one in terms of high school recruiting. Now, transfers is a little bit different, but I haven't seen any super impact transfers, any transfers. I'm like, oh, they got themselves one of those ones at quarterback. Grunkemeyer showed flashes of really good, showed flashes of Bryce Baker, not as much of either. I haven't really seen anything from him, so we'll see there. But I'm surprised that Grunkemeyer is not definitively the guy.
Yeah, I think it will be. And just even reading more of the reporting from Andy Bitter, again, from Tech Sideline, which is probably like the Virginia Tech website. Although, I mean, maybe we're going to have a Locked On Hokies here soon, Virginia Tech fans. I know you all have been asking for it, but they do a great job. But yeah, it sounds like James is doing this right now, and he will name a quarterback. They're not going to make this a week one mystery. People are going to know. So we may know this sooner rather than later, but at least in the interim, they're allowing all four of those guys an opportunity. As a Carolina fan, am fascinated to see what happens with Bryce Baker, as that was a guy who, when he was getting recruited to Chapel Hill by Mac Brown and that staff, there was a lot of talk about how high they were on him. And they've had some success with some in-state guys recently, Drake May, Sam Howell, not saying that he was going to end up being one of those dudes, but he was somebody who there was a lot about him and the way he ended up rising, especially in the recruiting ranks, for him to not get an opportunity last season, despite, the poor quarterback play, was disappointing. And very clearly he was not Belichick's guy. He's now James Franklin, who was fighting tooth and nail to get him to flip, even though Carolina didn't even have a coach at the point in time when Bryce Baker decided that he was going to sign with the impending staff. So we'll be interested to see how that plays out, but I bet it's Grunkemeyer. And then I'll be curious to see how Bryce Baker is able to potentially push him if it ends up being a competition between those two. But there's some other news around the ACC. Kevin Jennings is limited right now in practice. Isaac Brown dealing with something, and big news on the defensive line front for the Wolfpack. We'll talk about that here in just a moment on Locked On ACC. There are more live events than ever we're seeing right now. Games, concerts, comedy shows, festivals. The hard part usually isn't deciding what you want to attend. It's actually getting the tickets. Between long wait times, confusing checkout processes, and surprise fees, buying tickets can sometimes feel harder than it should. That's why so many fans are turning to Game Time. The app is built to make buying tickets simple with upfront pricing, seat views before you buy, and exclusive savings opportunities that help you get to the events you want without the usual hassle. There's just something different about being there live, whether it's a crowd reaction, the energy in the building, or a moment that everyone experiences together. It's one of those things that doesn't fully translate through a screen. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets to every type of event with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. One more segment here on this episode of Locked On ACC. Going around the conference, some more camp buzz. Two key injuries to monitor over the next couple of weeks as we count down the days to week one there on Labor Day weekend. SMU and Louisville both have massive games. SMU on Labor Day night to Tallahassee against Florida State. And then you look at Louisville, they are the night before on that Sunday against Ole Miss in Nashville. Really hate that Notre Dame's also playing at the same time because would have liked to have had like last year, have a game in the afternoon, have a game in the evening. But that's not what's going to happen. So we're going to have to double that one that Sunday. But Kevin Jennings apparently has been limited due to an issue of his throwing hand. Rhett Lastly saying that apparently the first night of practice in the locker room, he was leaving the door, someone was coming in, got pushed into him, and hurt the tip of his finger. So doesn't seem to be a serious issue, just a really bad jam. But they're going to take it a week, maybe two, just to make sure he's good to go by game one. Then Isaac Brown apparently was working onto the side with trainers last week, but stretched with the rest of the team, did some individual work, and they were just trying to get him closer to 100%. So those two injuries, and knowing the opponents that play week one, which one would be more concerning to you, Kenton?
I mean, knowing the full scope of it, Isaac Brown, in terms of knowing the full scope, but if you're talking about which one of these players can least afford to be injured, it's Kevin Jennings by a mile. I mean, you can't take away QB1 and just be like, oh, everything's going to be all right. It's the reason why Duke is the defending ACC champs, and nobody is saying the championship runs through Durham. You know why? Because their quarterback no longer runs through Durham. He's running through Miami. He's down there in South Beach. So it's a very different thing there. So Kevin Jennings, he has to, whatever that problem is, get it figured out. Now, from what I've heard, the Kevin Jennings injury situation is much more precautionary, and there's nothing there. It's just like we don't want him to, be throwing and hit his hand any further, anything like that. Isaac Brown, a little bit more vague, which seems like it's a little bit more substantial. That's something you learn dealing with these college coaches. If they're not obligated to tell you, quiet on the creek. You know what I mean? They keep it real low. So With that being said, I think that Isaac Brown's is more substantial in real life. But if you're talking about who could be afforded to be missed less, it's definitely Kevin Jennings.
Yeah, absolutely. I think concern level probably not that high with Kevin Jennings from, what the reporting is and what Brett Lashley had to say. And he has a great opportunity. I mean, SMU has a great opportunity before the nation's eyes. And look, you look at Florida State a couple years ago, I think a big reason why Bill O'Brien and Boston College won that game was because they got to see Florida State the week prior. Now, FSU, I think, playing like New Mexico State this time around and not a Georgia Tech, so they don't have to show nearly as much, you would hope, in week 0, to where SMU, yes, will get to evaluate. So they have the advantage there, but a great opportunity for Kevin, especially knowing that there's the Heisman campaign that they got going on there. But Isaac Brown, knowing that, I mean, look, Ole Miss, no question about the offensive talent that they have there. Like, that one could be a track meet. And Trey Richardson, the transfer from Vanderbilt, he's also been banged up throughout spring. He's back out there ready to go and appears to be one of their top playmakers. He's been dealing with a foot injury. So Lincoln Keenholz, who's going to be making his first career start against Ole Miss there on Labor Day weekend, needs to be able to get some continuity with him. And, Isaac Brown was banged up last year as well at Louisville. So they can't have that. And running backs are just not in a position where you're ever going to be 100% healthy. So you certainly don't want to go in the season already dealing with something, which it seems to be the case. They do have Kewan Brown, does allow them to figure out who that third guy could be, provided that Isaac does have something that carries into the season. But that's the one I would consider the most, just knowing who Louisville plays week 1 and that they're going to need every single body out there against the Rebels in a game, which is going to be huge just for the perception of not just Louisville, but this conference. Please do not get embarrassed. NC State, big news for the Wolfpack. They've had 2 different guys be told that they were no longer eligible. Jalen Hampton, he is not seeming to fight this one at all. But Katron Evans, who is transferring from Marshall, he is fighting it. And he is right now has been declared immediately eligible through August 24th, which the first game is going to be August 29th, correct? On that Saturday. So we'll have to wait and see whether he's going to get a full injunction, which will make him eligible to play the entirety of the season. But reading up on some NC State just intel from Michael Clark of Pack Power over on 247 Network. This is a big one as the Wolfpack are really trying to rebuild that defensive line, losing guys like Brandon Cleveland and trying to figure out what exactly they're going to do, especially at that nose guard position. You certainly know far more about that than I do, Kenton.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And shout out to Katron Evans. Babytron is one of my favorite rappers, and he spit a bar that reminds me of this. Every piece hidden in the store, I'm the Green Lantern. NC State finally got them a win in court. We finally got us a green in court. Smackdown in court, back to back to back to back. But in all seriousness, this is a massive win for NC State because you look at the defensive tackle position, specifically the nose guard position, it's looking thin. It's looking very, very paltry at that nose guard position. And don't get me wrong, Josiah Jojo Victor is somebody that everybody loves. Everybody thinks very highly of him. He's been reported on very highly going into the offseason, and now coming out of the offseason. There is no defensive tackle. There is no nose guard that can play 80% of the snaps. The nature of that job is 200-300-pound men are convinced that they're going to move you every play. That's literally every single play of your life. And you think that a human body can do that 50, 60, 70 times? If you believe that, don't worry about it. I've got some very good oceanfront property in Detroit, Michigan for you to buy. Again, give me the money. We'll talk about it later. But it just doesn't work like that. So there needs to be more depth. And Evans was supposed to supply that. It seems like he may be able to supply it. So I'm right here to see what happens, and we'll be reporting on it step by step as this thing goes through the courts.
Yeah, and looking at it just from the reporting from, again, packpower.com, he's eligible through August 24th, but we'll have another conference on August 18th to set a hearing date for an injunction. So if that goes through, he would then be eligible for the entire 2026 season, and that will be something I'm sure over on Locked On Wolfpack here on the show as well that we'll be breaking down and trying to monitor heading into what's a very important game going against Virginia that week 1 or week 0. I mean, you think about it, there's a lot of talk about State, and I want to get into State maybe tomorrow on the show, because people are looking at the schedule. We don't really know what any of these teams are going to be, but we do know just based off of some of the the brand names, how people have done in the portal, how they've done building them, kind of who you would expect to actually be able to carry over season to season and have success. And State not playing a lot of those teams this season. And of course, Dave Doran, year 14, he's done a great job there. No matter what any NC State fan wants to tell me, the guy's had a lot of success. And CJ Bailey apparently looking like at a different level at this point in time. So big opportunity for the Wolfpack there, week 0 in Charlottesville to just get off the mat and to have all that momentum, because Lord knows how your fan base acts when things don't go. I mean, look, there's plenty of things that have not gone their way, but certainly when, and the Carolina fans do the same thing, but like when you have football, you have a little bit of hype, when you lose week 1, it's like, it's hard to get everybody back on board, and it's going to be all same old Dave, I'm sure, if that ends up not going the Pack's way. But I can't wait for that game. Certainly far more excited about how that one plays out than the game between Carolina and TCU, because either way, State, Virginia, one of them loses, I win, because I don't like either one of those schools.
I ain't mad at you, Julian. Sometimes you got to root for the asteroid, brother. Sometimes you got to do it.
Always rooting for Bane. But that's going to wrap up this edition of the Locked On ACC podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We're your hosts, as always, Julian Council and Kenton Gibbs. Again, subscribe and follow the show for free over on YouTube and wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. And be sure to follow us over on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, at Julian Council and at TGIF_Kenton. In the meantime, be safe, be happy, be whole, and we'll talk to y'all on Tuesday, where we're going to look across the ACC some more at some scrimmages. Had one at Raleigh, NC State, down in Tallahassee. Maybe talk a little bit more about the Wolfpack, as I do look at them as a team that potentially dark horse ACC title contender. I'm not going to say they're going to win it, but they could certainly get to Charlotte for the first time, which it is long overdue. All that and more coming up here on Tuesday on Locked On ACC.